Have you ever felt like the harder you try to earn someone's respect, the more they seem to disregard you? You're kind in your actions, patient in your listening, even sacrificing your time and emotions just to keep the peace, yet what you receive in return is indifference, a lack of care, or even cold silence, as if your presence means nothing at all. In a world where appearances are valued more than depth, and noise is rewarded more than inner strength, it's no wonder many people start believing they have to stand out just to be seen. They try to please everyone, play small, stay quiet, even bend their personal values just to hold on to relationships that make them feel less alone. But the more they bow their heads, the easier it becomes for others to forget they, too, have dignity. So many people carry the belief that if they're good enough, kind enough, and agreeable enough, others will naturally treat them fairly. But life doesn't always echo back that kindness. The more you give, the more people assume it's expected. The more you rush to explain yourself, the less they care to understand. And the more afraid you are of being misunderstood, the more your softness gets mistaken for weakness. This is the dangerous spiral of chasing respect, a pursuit that seems logical on the surface, but often leads to losing more of yourself than gaining any meaningful position in others' eyes. At some point, we all need to pause and ask ourselves, what am I really living for? Am I living to be accepted, or am I living in alignment with the principles I know are right? Am I trying to be liked, or quietly hoping someone will one day recognize the value I hold within? There's an unspoken truth that only those who felt enough hurt, silence, and disappointment truly come to know. Respect doesn't come because you beg for it. It comes when you stop, lift your head, and live in alignment with your core values, even if no one agrees, even if no one notices. The Stoic mindset doesn't focus on getting others to validate you. It brings you back to the one thing you can truly control: yourself. You can't control how people see you, how they act, or how they respond. But you can always control how you respond, how you choose to live, and what you allow to take up space in your mind. When you begin to master your choices rather than letting others' emotions and expectations dictate your behavior, you no longer need anyone to back you up just to feel secure. And it's in that moment that you start to radiate an energy people can't ignore, not because you're forceful, but because you no longer need them to feel whole. This video isn't about tricks to appear impressive or communication hacks to seem more likable. Instead, we're going to explore what truly builds lasting respect, not from words, but from inner character, from the boundaries you uphold, from the silence you don't feel the need to justify, and from the alignment between what you believe and how you live. We're not here to chase admiration, we're here to become the kind of person others can't help but admire, through calm presence, steady conviction, and a self-respect no one can take from you. Because only when you stop seeing respect as a reward can you finally live as if you've always deserved it. Why the more you chase respect, the more you lose it? There's a bitter truth that many people only realize after going through repeated emotional wounds. The more you desire and chase after respect, the more it drifts away from you coldly and mercilessly. Because when you live seeking approval from others, you unknowingly give them the power to define your worth. And once someone holds the key to your emotions, they no longer need to respect you because you've already placed yourself in a position of dependence. As we grow up, many of us are taught to be nice, to be well-mannered, to avoid making others uncomfortable. Over the years, these gentle teachings slowly evolve into a flawed belief system that the more we humble ourselves, the more we'll be loved. That if we're good enough, kind enough, selfless enough, others will naturally treat us with the same care. But life doesn't operate by such naive equations, because in reality, people rarely respect what's given too easily, and they certainly don't value those who abandon themselves just to be accepted. The more you try to please everyone, the less people see you as someone with convictions. The more quickly you apologize for things that weren't your fault, the more they assume you'll carry burdens that aren't your own. The more afraid you are of upsetting others and avoid setting clear boundaries, the more likely you are to become their emotional dumping ground, absorbing their frustrations, demands, and manipulation without hesitation. People who live solely to earn respect often don't realize they're betraying a deeper sense of self-worth. Because if you truly believed in your value, you wouldn't need outside validation. And if you don't believe in it, then no amount of praise can fill that void, because the respect you receive will feel hollow, fragile, easily shattered the moment someone changes their tone. From a Stoic perspective grounded in reason and self-discipline, chasing respect is a subtle way of surrendering your personal power. When you believe your emotional state depends on someone else's words, behavior, or attention, you're handing over control of your inner life, a dangerous act that sets the stage for internal confusion and disorientation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't be." That single line, while seemingly simple, holds a liberating truth. You don't need others to treat you right in order to remain at peace. You don't have to control the world to maintain your dignity. And you certainly don't need others to value you in order to know you're worthy. When you stop chasing respect from others, you begin facing a difficult but necessary truth. Are you living from your convictions or from your fears? Do you live from a belief in your inner worth or from the fear of being left behind? Do you trust that you have the right to say no without explanation, or are you afraid that standing your ground will make you look selfish? And as you begin answering those questions with honesty, you also start to see the things that were always obvious but clouded by your need to be accepted. The relationships that exhaust you because you're always trying to prove yourself. The conversations where your voice is constantly dismissed. The moments where you feel you have to hold yourself together just to avoid being underestimated. That's when a choice must be made. Do you keep exhausting yourself trying to be seen, or do you reclaim your energy and build a presence that others simply cannot ignore? Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're living with clarity, strength, and self-respect. You don't need to be someone extraordinary to be respected. You just need to live like you no longer require anyone's permission to feel whole. And that quiet confidence, silent dignity is what truly makes others take notice. Not because you demand recognition, but because you don't need it. Not because you shout to claim your place, but because you refuse to shrink for a space that doesn't deserve you. People who live from a grounded inner core don't need arguments to prove they're right. They don't need emotional outbursts to show they're hurt. They don't need to display their value for it to be real, because they understand true worth exists, even when no one is watching. And it's in the moment you stop treating respect as something to be won from the outside that you begin to grow into the kind of person others want to respect, not because they're forced to, but because they can't help it. That's not just a victory. That's an awakening. Not a power that comes from others, but a return to the power within yourself. And from that place, the real transformation begins. If you want others to respect you naturally, you have to start from the only place where true respect can take root, within yourself. Not from compliments, admiring glances, or applause from the outside, but from how you treat yourself, especially when no one's watching. Self-respect isn't a fleeting emotion, it's a way of living. It's built through consistent behavior, clearly defined boundaries, and the refusal to betray yourself in exchange for temporary peace. The more loyal you are to what you believe is right, even when no one agrees, the more you begin to build a kind of force field that others can sense. This is someone who cannot be dismissed. Take a look at your daily life. Do you often break promises you make to yourself? Do you plan to wake up early, journal, or focus on what matters but then easily give up because you're tired? Do you say it's fine when someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, even though something inside you feels off? Every time you do that, no matter how small it seems, you send a message to your inner self: I'm not important enough to protect. From the Stoic perspective, this isn't just a moment of weakness. It's the loss of spiritual sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius, a man who faced war, rebellion, and repeated personal losses, once wrote, "A happy man is one who is in harmony with himself." That doesn't mean being selfish or shutting the world out. It means aligning your actions, thoughts, and values, and not abandoning your inner compass just to be accepted by others. Remember, respect doesn't come from meeting everyone's expectations. It comes as a natural consequence of living in integrity with your inner truth. The people who command your respect from the very first moment don't do it through effort. They don't try to impress or over-explain. Their consistency, their alignment between word and deed speaks louder than anything else, and you can feel it even before they speak. So how do you build self-respect from within? First, you must be decisive with yourself. If you say you'll do something, follow through. If you set a boundary, hold it. If you realize something no longer aligns with you, have the courage to walk away, even if it means standing alone. Steadiness doesn't come from instinct, it comes from conscious discipline. And that discipline starts every time you choose your truth over your fear of being judged. Next, identify 3 core values that you will never compromise, no matter who disagrees, no matter if the people you love walk away. Write them down. Put them somewhere visible. And every night ask yourself, did I live by these values today? This is a form of self-accountability, not to shame yourself, but to witness your own growth. Are you moving closer to the version of yourself you admire, or drifting further from it? You also need to protect your inner stillness like it's sacred ground. If you find yourself becoming reactive, overly defensive, or emotionally rattled by someone's words, pause and ask, why am I letting them have this much influence over my internal state? That's a sign that your mental boundaries are being breached, boundaries that should belong solely to you. In the practice of rational living, this is called separating what you can control from what you can't. You can't control who loves you, who understands you, or who respects you, but you can control how you live, and that, more than any demand or plea, sends the strongest signal about who you are. And never underestimate the power of the small things. Someone who is punctual is someone who can be trusted. Someone who keeps their word is someone of integrity. Someone who doesn't react impulsively is someone with depth. These traits don't need to be broadcast, they radiate on their own and force others to reconsider how they treat you. You cannot demand others to treat you well if you betray yourself every day. You cannot expect to be respected if you're afraid to stand for what you believe in. And you certainly cannot build a life worthy of admiration if your soul is always waiting for permission to be authentic. True respect doesn't come from the outside, it's forged from the material you use to shape yourself every single day. There's a kind of person who, when they walk into a room, naturally draws every eye. They don't say anything to attract attention. They don't need to posture or stand out. Yet something in their presence makes people instinctively take notice, keep a respectful distance, and respect them. That presence doesn't come from external power. It's the quiet strength of someone who has learned to stay calm in chaos and preserve their dignity, even when they are underestimated. They don't react, they observe. They don't shout to be heard, they listen first to understand. They don't need to prove anything, because their silence carries enough weight to shift the tone of a room. In the Stoic way of life, silence is not passivity, it is a deliberate choice. It's the decision not to join unnecessary battles. It's how you protect your inner world from the intrusion of shallow criticism. It's the clearest way to say, I don't need to react in order to prove I exist. Epictetus once said, when someone offends you, remember it is your judgment that gives their words the power to hurt you. That means you always have a choice: to react instantly and defend your ego, or to remain silent and protect your dignity. In modern society, reactivity has become the default instinct. A single negative comment, a disapproving look, or even a minor misunderstanding is often enough to trigger an immediate response, defending, explaining, or even retaliating. But reacting instantly isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just a sign that you haven't developed the inner stability to geflock and below, and silence is what's needed most. And that's why those who know how to stay silent at the right moments often make others uneasy. They aren't easily led or provoked. Instead, they control the tone of the room through a steady calm that can't be read. Others don't know what you're thinking, and it's that uncertainty that makes them tread carefully. Silence isn't merely the absence of noise. It's a nonverbal message of inner strength. When you stay silent in the face of provocation, you're saying, I don't need to lower myself to respond to what isn't worth it. When you decline to explain things that don't require explanation, you're declaring, my worth doesn't need to be defended in words. And when you remain composed while others lose control, you demonstrate that you're the only one in the room still holding sovereignty over yourself. Think back to the last time you truly respected someone. Was it someone who stayed calm during a tense argument? Someone who didn't raise their voice to prove they were right? Someone who knew when to speak and, more importantly, when not to? In a world where everyone's trying to be heard, stillness often becomes the greatest form of power. But silence isn't about going quiet out of fear or passivity. The kind of silence worth cultivating comes from conscious choice. You observe before you speak, you analyze before you act, and you reserve your energy for what truly deserves it. Alongside silence comes another form of language, the language of your body, your gaze, your presence. When you enter a room with upright posture, steady steps, and a grounded gaze, not anxious but firm, you're saying something powerful without uttering a word. I don't need attention, but I am here. In contrast, someone who scrambles to justify themselves, rushes to impress, or seems scattered in their movements reveals the insecurity they're trying to hide. You don't need to be flawless to be respected. You just need to be steady in your energy and in your demeanor. Others may not always agree with you, but they won't treat you lightly when they sense you're not easily shaken. And above all, remember this: silence does not make you weaker. It makes you harder to hurt. It doesn't make you passive, it protects you from unnecessary battles. It doesn't strip your voice away, it makes your voice more valuable when you choose to use it. The less you speak, the more your words carry weight. The less you react, the more your presence commands respect. And the more you know when to stay silent, the more others will feel compelled to take you seriously. No one can sustainably respect you if you don't know where you end and they begin. That's the role of boundaries, not physical fences, but invisible lines that are crystal clear. They define who you are, what you allow, and what you absolutely will not tolerate. In everyday life, boundaries aren't declared through dramatic statements, but through consistent actions, calm refusals, and firm decisions made without anger. A person with strong boundaries isn't cold, they're simply unwilling to trade their self-respect for someone else's comfort. It's unfortunate that in a society where kindness is often confused with unlimited openness, many people have been taught how to yield but never taught how to protect the sacred part of themselves that no one should have access to. They don't know how to say no for fear of appearing selfish. They stay silent in the face of unfairness for fear of upsetting others. They endure disrespectful behavior simply because they think it's not worth the trouble. But you can't expect others to respect what you don't stand up to protect. If you don't guard the door to your own soul, you shouldn't be surprised when others walk in with muddy feet. From the Stoic philosophy rooted in self-mastery and reason, boundaries are more than limitations, they are declarations of identity. When you set a clear boundary, you are saying, I know who I am. I know what is worthy of my time, my energy, and my dignity. And that clarity forces others, even those who dislike it, to adjust their behavior when they're around you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. That is a boundary rooted in moral integrity. No need for lengthy explanations, no debates about right and wrong. You simply know it, and you hold it. That is enough. The problem is, many people only realize they lack boundaries after they've been hurt too many times. They don't know when they should have said no because they never believed they had the right to. They don't know when to walk away because they were taught that patience is always a virtue. They're afraid to set conditions, fearing they'll be seen as distant, rigid, or difficult. But you weren't born to please everyone. You were born to live in alignment with the unique values you carry. And to protect that, you must learn to set boundaries, not to push people away, but to guard what is sacred within you from being violated. Start with the smallest things. If you need personal space, don't feel guilty for not replying to messages immediately. If someone keeps teasing you in ways that make you uncomfortable, don't fake a laugh, say clearly that it's not okay. If a relationship makes you constantly feel the need to prove yourself just to avoid being dismissed, that's a sign your boundaries are being crossed and it's time to act. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you're cold. It means you have self-respect. Just like a house has doors and locks, no one thinks you're unfriendly for not letting strangers into your bedroom on the first meeting. So why, in your inner life, would you let anyone walk straight into your most private spaces just because you're afraid of upsetting them? People with clear boundaries don't need to demand respect because their self-respect forces others to choose, either adjust their behavior or walk away. Either way, you win because you haven't betrayed yourself to maintain a connection that was never worthy of you. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're a navigation system for your inner freedom. They allow you to love without being manipulated, to give without being drained, to be present without having to sacrifice your inner peace. And in a world where everyone is scrambling for attention, boundaries are how you create a presence that carries weight, not because you try to impress, but because you refuse to be shaken. People may not say it aloud, but they feel it. This is someone you cannot approach without respect. One of the most common mistakes people make that causes them to lose their sense of dignity and the respect of others is over-explaining. They explain why they're hurt, why they need space, why they can't meet someone's expectations, why they chose to walk away, as if their right to honor what feels true depends on someone else's understanding or approval. But the truth is this: you don't need to be understood in order to honor your values. Respect doesn't arise from long-winded justifications. It flows from the quiet consistency between what you believe and how you live. If you still feel the need to constantly clarify so people won't misunderstand you, if you still feel guilty for choosing what protects your inner peace, that's a sign you're still living under the weight of external expectations, not standing firmly in the light of loyalty to yourself. A life rooted in reason doesn't encourage isolation. It teaches one core principle: you are never allowed to betray yourself just to avoid being misunderstood. And if someone requires you to prove your worth or your choices, they don't truly respect you. They simply want you to fit into their expectations. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be yourself, and if that doesn't please others, that's their problem, not yours." This isn't arrogance, it's clarity. You're not here to become a version of yourself that fits every glance from the outside. You're here to be whole, aligned in thought, word, and action, regardless of the noise around you. A person who lives in alignment doesn't need to explain. They let their actions speak. They don't need to say, "I'll leave if I'm not respected," because their presence already carries that boundary. They don't debate their worth, because they know anyone who needs to be convinced doesn't deserve the right to define them. And that's why those who live in truth through silence, through steadiness, through consistency always carry an air of untouchable strength. You can't guilt them into staying. You can't emotionally manipulate them into bending. You can't persuade them to abandon principle, because they're not here for comfort. They're here for what's right. Think of the people you truly respect. Aren't they the ones who speak little, but every word carries weight? They may not always be warm, but you can't dismiss them. They may not be flashy, but they always command your full presence. That's the power of someone who has nothing to prove. When you stop explaining just to be understood, you begin to gain clarity with yourself. When you stop compromising what you know is wrong, you become trustworthy in the eyes of others. And when you stop stretching to be accepted, you begin to show up as someone solid, someone who can't be defined and certainly can't be ignored. This path is not easy. You will lose relationships that were held together by compromise. You will disappoint some people. You may even face criticism. But in return, you'll gain something no one can take from you: the alignment between your inner world and your outward life. From there, every step you take becomes firmer. Every word you speak carries more weight. Every decision you make, no matter who disagrees, holds the strength of integrity. And that's what allows you to stop asking for respect and still receive it. The people who talk the most about their values are often the ones still unsure of them. But those who live rightly, directly, without needing agreement, they simply act. and let time speak for them. They are the living reminder that true character doesn't come from what you say, it comes from the harmony between your inner self and your outward being. Eventually, you'll reach a point where you no longer need to argue. You won't get angry when misunderstood. You won't shrink just to preserve a fragile connection. Instead, you'll stand tall not to oppose anyone, but to protect the one thing that matters most: the respect you owe yourself. And it is precisely at that moment that you no longer have to chase respect, because you've become the kind of person others cannot help but respect. In life, there's a certain type of person who makes you instinctively straighten up, not because they're flashy, and not because they demand attention, but because something in their presence keeps you from acting small in front of them. They don't ask for respect, but you find yourself giving it. This paradox may sound contradictory, but it reveals the deepest truth about genuine respect. It cannot be requested, manipulated, or traded. It only belongs to those who don't need it to know they're worthy. And this is something those who live with reason and self-mastery understand deeply. You can't control how others see you, but you can control how you live. And that alone is enough to shift the way the world treats you. Those who don't need respect aren't cold or indifferent. On the contrary, they're some of the most deeply feeling individuals, but they've traveled far enough on their inner journey to understand real worth doesn't need external validation. They don't wait to be understood in order to feel steady. They don't need praise in order to feel confident. And they don't measure themselves by anyone's gaze or approval. They live rightly because living rightly is the only thing that truly matters, whether anyone notices or not. These people don't flaunt their morals, preach their values, or perform just to impress. And precisely because they don't try to craft an image, they become a model. Precisely because they don't control how they're perceived, they're seen more clearly. And precisely because they don't chase acceptance, they become more worthy of it than anyone else. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time worrying about being recognized. Strive to be worthy of being remembered." And that's exactly how he lived. Through war, rebellion, and the crushing pressure of power, he chose virtue over vanity, stillness over showmanship, and inner strength over public approval. From that, we learn a powerful truth. Enduring respect doesn't come from where you stand in society, it comes from where you stand before your own conscience. When you no longer need admiration, you can act not for applause, but for what is right. When you no longer need to be understood, you can choose truth over comfort. When you no longer cling to relationships at any cost, you can let go of connections that pull you away from yourself. And in that moment, you become someone who can't be reached by manipulation, can't be moved by guilt, and can't be clouded by noise. You walk into a room without needing the spotlight, yet eyes still turn toward you. You speak softly, yet people pause to listen. You set a boundary without drama, yet everyone senses the line they cannot cross. You don't need respect because your very presence carries a silent message. I don't need recognition to exist, but I exist in a way that demands to be recognized. And that is the pinnacle of true freedom. Not having to chase approval and still never being abandoned. Not living to meet expectations and still never feeling alone. Not trying to impress and still leaving a lasting impact. That kind of person isn't perfect and they're not cold. They are someone who has realized a simple truth. Respect cannot be earned through longing. It can only arise when you live as though you already possess it. That wholeness can't be borrowed, traded, or stolen. It's forged in every moment you uphold a principle despite being criticized. In every moment you choose silence when you want to scream. In every moment you walk away, even when it hurts. The person who no longer needs to be respected is someone who has outgrown the need to be propped up by reputation because they've learned to elevate themselves with truth and unwavering integrity. And that is why they are respected more than anyone still chasing it. Respect, something many people spend their entire lives chasing, turns out to be not something you can ask for, demand, or earn by trying to be right in other people's eyes. It doesn't come from perfection, and it certainly doesn't come from bending over backwards to please everyone. It arises quietly and powerfully from how you treat yourself when no one is watching. We've walked through 6 parts, each not just a perspective, but a reminder that the more you chase respect from the outside, the more you drift away from your true inner value, and that only when you return to yourself, live truthfully, stand firmly, and no longer need to be respected do you finally earn it. No one else can build your self-respect. No one else can live a life of principles, boundaries, silence, and inner strength for you. Only you know when you're speaking too much just to feel understood. Only you know when you're yielding so much that you forget who you are. And only you know when you're living for the outside world instead of living as someone who already holds unshakable worth within. In Stoic philosophy, there is no such thing as true respect if it doesn't come from a stable inner self. Marcus Aurelius, who stood at the peak of power, still wrote in his journal every night not for others to read, but to stay anchored in his own nature. Epictetus, born a slave, still spoke of freedom, not physical freedom, but the freedom to live untouched by the opinions and judgments of others. And you, right now, can begin that same path, not waiting for others to change, not waiting to be perfect, not waiting for the right moment. You only need to choose to live rightly. You only need to choose not to betray what you already know to be true. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to argue. You don't need to force yourself into someone else's mold. You just need to show up as yourself, grounded, measured, kind, and too clear to be distorted. Remember this, people don't respect you because you please them. People respect you because you dare to live without needing their approval. And when you no longer need to be respected, you begin to embody the kind of person who naturally commands it. This week, choose one thing you usually do to seek validation and stop doing it. Try living a moment without explaining, without flattering, without performing. And when someone crosses a boundary you've clearly set, hold the line. No anger, no drama, just clarity. No one teaches you how others will respect you, but you can teach them through the way you live. If this video touched something inside you, maybe an old wound, a boundary you once let slip, or simply a soft awareness that says, I don't need to keep forcing it anymore, then hold on to that. Don't rush back into the cycle of pleasing, justifying, or chasing approval. Walk forward not to impress, but to live rightly. Stay silent not to win, but to remain steady. And live not to be seen, but to radiate something others cannot ignore.